All right, so this is my Sprint 1 status update. It is Monday the 8th, and I will get started. I picked the weather prediction prompt. Felt like I would try something different from the one that we did last fall, and actually sounded really interesting too. So I will run through my sprint update document and kind of give you an idea of what I've done so far and where I feel like I'm at and what my next plans are. So for right now, what I am currently working on, I've done a little bit of preliminary research into weather forecasting. But I haven't gotten too bogged down in that. I feel like that was a shortcoming last time. I spent a lot of time trying to reach out to companies within the currency mining and really didn't have any response. And realistically, with the time frame that we have, my expectation is that trying to reach out to somebody to find out some specifications directly from them is probably not likely. So I have done a little research. I intend to do a little bit more, but I am kind of like you have cited, going to be going off of a lot of assumptions as far as defining like specific needs, that kind of stuff. My next bullet point, I am determining format for my documentation. Right now, I've got a tech spec document that I am started on. I am right now going to use a template that I found. It is in a .docx format, so I feel a little better using that template because I think I'll be able to edit it, and if I need to kind of reformat it in a more drastic way, it would be a lot easier to do that in that format rather than if it was a PDF. I do think it'll be easier to use this and not create my own. I'm not real good at that anyway, and having a kind of a guideline of format will be helpful. That's going to be my primary focus for the next couple days, to get that formatted, fill it in, and have it structured in such a way that I can start adding to it as I'm moving forward. Let's see. I've referenced in this document, there's a WikiHow guide and then a Stack Overflow guide. Both of those I thought had some pretty good points. They were not too verbose or complicated, but have a really easy to follow outline for a tech spec doc. Let's see. Next bullet point was I did an installation of all of my necessary software that I think I'll need up to this point. I am predominantly going to be using GNS3 for like building out and testing topology. The other software doesn't actually run on an Apple, so that kind of made that a simple decision. I've gotten GNS3 uploaded, loaded in. It is running. I have VMware Workstation loaded, and I have the GNS3 VMware or VM rather on there. I've got them linked up and running. I am having some issues with CPU usage, particularly the GNS3 software itself. So done a little bit of research into that. I have not found an answer, but because I'm not using it a bunch right now, I've decided to kind of put that on the back burner and focus on some other things moving forward. I also found some cloud-based software called Lucidchart, and does all sorts of diagramming, but they have some dedicated network topology diagramming aspects to it. I was able to sign up for a free account with that because of my student status, so that was helpful. It's a very rich, I don't know, you may be familiar with it, but it was very feature rich, has a lot of even like Cisco specific icons and things like that built into it already. So it should be very easy for me to create some documentation of like physical topology and some of the software topology that's overlaid on top of that. Let's see. I think that's it as far as like installed software or cloud-based apps. Obviously using Trello, and I do believe that I will discuss that a little bit later, but kind of building off of the little bit that I learned and exposure that I got from the fall semester, using a lot of labeling and going into the done section for each sprint. So in an effort to kind of keep things a little more chunked up and organized, I'll be using a single column for each finished sprint. Let's see. So I've got my YouTube set up and established, and obviously that will be available when you get this video. And then I, in the last week, spent a decent amount of time going through the Cisco validated designs. I felt like that would be some time well spent to kind of give me some framework to start working with. One of my struggles with this project as a whole is that it is very nebulous, and I tend to do a little better when I'm provided some structure and have a framework to work within. So I'm trying to create that for myself. In kind of filtering through what is available on the Cisco validated designs, I settled on the campus LAN, which makes sense, I think, for this project. And I think that in my mind, the way that I see this kind of fleshing out is going to be a main campus site at one of the universities that will likely host the majority of the storage and some servers for virtualization, so that the other two can kind of function more as a satellite. My thinking on this is I think it'll be easier to design, but I also think that it's actually a realistic way that things would be set up. I know that schools are generally running on pretty tight budgets, and so even from the perspective of being able to centralize some of the hardware and not have to duplicate that from site to site will potentially pose some cost savings. So I think that the campus LAN is going to be a good framework for that. The two smaller sites, realistically, in my mind, the way that I envision this, I don't think that this is necessarily going to be some huge department or is even really going to need to be able to service, hundreds of computers like a business campus would. This is a small section of a school. It's the department within that school. And really, it's probably going to be strictly servicing like grad students or professors, people that are actually performing research. In my mind, I feel like that probably at a school campus doesn't constitute more than maybe 30 people. So I think that the campus LAN design for smaller to medium-sized campuses should be sufficient to service this. I may need to use some a little higher end hardware than is suggested on these to accommodate some of the larger bandwidth needs that I think are potential. But I still think that using those smaller templates will make sense. And again, with the mindset of this being a school, we're operating off of a budget, to me that kind of makes sense. So I'm going to use that kind of as my major framework. I also think that some of the data center templates will be applicable, considering that there is going to be a lot of storage, and because I'm going to be designating one of those campuses as functionally a data center, a storage hub for all of that mapping, and then also for some virtualization. I think that there'll be some applicable aspects of the data storage or data center, rather, CVD that I can kind of take and incorporate into the campus LAN design. Let's see. Yeah, I think I covered all of those bullet points. One of the things I did do in an effort to kind of try and chunk this up and create some more actionable items was just to take the project prompt and each of the bullet points that you've included in that, I basically just went in and kind of, a lot of it is me just kind of, it's my stream of consciousness of like reading that prompt and saying, okay, what do I see as questions that I'm going to need to answer? What are things that are areas that I may know a little bit about, or what are some points that I'm going to need to do some research and, figure out what does that acronym even mean? So I've done that. I attached that to the document. It is definitely my like stream of consciousness in reading through those bullet points. So it's not necessarily documentation or anything like that, but I did want to attach that just so you kind of have an idea of kind of where my head is at for the prompt as a whole. Let's see. I've been spending some time looking at proof of concept. That's honestly something I don't really know a lot about. I don't know. I had a discussion about this with my wife the other day, but because I took a lot of these classes a few years ago, I don't know if maybe some of the curriculum has changed, and that was something that wasn't covered when I took the class. I don't particularly remember that being covered. So I don't know if that's something that has changed, and maybe that the idea of how to design that has been discussed in some of the more current iterations of the curriculum. But that's something I don't have a lot of exposure to. So I've been doing some research into that. I found some good stuff. There's an article on itworld.com that I linked to my document. I thought had some really good guidelines. I took some notes on it, and I did attach an image of those notes as well. So I'm definitely still trying to figure that out. I definitely have a more of a framework and an understanding, but one of the stumbling blocks, or not really a stumbling block, but a challenge that I've encountered is that most of the stuff that I find, both for tech specs and for proof of concept, are software related. And so I'm kind of having to go through and translate that for a network application, which is taking a little bit of time to kind of process through and do. But I think I do have some good foundational stuff to work off of. All right. So next section is the challenges, upcoming items. I think I've touched on some of this a little bit, but I think what I see right now as the next big step that I need to make is going to be establishing what the specific needs at each of these 3 sites are going to be. And a lot of that I do think is going to derive from some assumptions. But I need to kind of figure out, all right, how many individuals am I servicing? How many workstations do I need to have set up? Assumptions are going to be that people are going to be working off of laptops probably a lot. So do I need to have a good wireless system set up in that small campus area that can service them for that? What do I need to establish as my assumption for data needs? In the prompt it references that there's a lot of mapping and that there'll need to be a lot of computational power for some of the actual processing of these algorithms that they have that do weather prediction, that kind of stuff. So I need to kind of go through and set some benchmarks or some specific numbers and metrics and needs that I think that they will need. I realize that that's probably going to change to some extent as I kind of get further into the process. But I want to have something to build off of. I think until I get that, it's going to be too nebulous, and it's going to be hard for me to design this and be able to move forward. So that's kind of my next major goal, is to get those numbers knocked out probably within this first half of this week, and then start building off of that. Let's see. Part of what I think I mentioned earlier, one of the bullet points that I had is, while I'll be using a centralized data storage, there'll obviously need to be some localized storage. So also kind of accounting for that. Let's see. Yeah, and then just the assumption that I'll be using more of a smaller campus LAN on the 2 satellite locations, and then more of that medium campus setup on the main campus. Let's see. Next bullet point, my other aspect of current focus is going to be getting that tech spec doc, which I did mention. I want to get that framed out enough that I can start adding to it. I want to be generating content based off of what you said. There's going to be a lot in that, and so the way that I feel like that probably is going to occur is just me throwing stuff in, making revisions, and continuing to add to and edit that. So yeah, I'll be working on that. I definitely have struggled with filling my Trello board with like smaller items. It's not really something I've ever done before. And so it's, I feel like it's hard for me to fill up Trello with 2 weeks of stuff, especially where I'm at right now. I'm trying to throw things in there, and I do think that once I kind of get past these next few days of establishing some of those needs, it'll be a lot easier to create like smaller actionable items. Right now, so much of it is kind of nebulous, and me just kind of trying to find out, define a proof of concept, that kind of stuff. So and the other end is that I'm just not as good at, as I work through things, deliberately going to Trello and throwing in a little, actionable item. So I'm going to start working on that a little bit more. My hope is that for this next sprint, I can be more intentional about creating those things, and then be a lot more available for me for the sprints moving forward. Let's see. My next bullet point says, I've never worked with Agile, and it shows. And just kind of acknowledge that I don't have enough to-do items in my Trello to fill out a 2-week period. This is another thing. I don't know if Agile is maybe something that has been incorporated into the curriculum before, but when I was taking classes, I feel like there was a class that I took that we spent maybe like 2 weeks on, and it was a very shallow dive into it, and I don't even know that it's specifically focused on Agile. So I found that the videos that I watched were helpful. I do think that part of what I've had to try and do is get a more basic understanding of Agile. And it's going to take, the realistic thing is that having not used it, having not had a lot of experience with it, it's definitely not going to be my natural proclivity. And so I am trying to be more intentional to incorporate that into this process, but it's definitely a learning process. Next bullet point was pieces of the final technical specification. There's not really anything. I didn't include what I have because it is basically just the framework with like nothing really even technical in it, outside of like naming or a brief description of the project itself. Let's see. And then carried over for doing, the only thing that I left and carried over was the creating a basic topology from CBD. I did include the notes that I have taken, and there's a little bit of sketching in that, but it is super simplified and not really that much. So I think part of what I'm going to do is start pulling more from the CBDs that I'm going to use, but also once I get some of the parameters set up and the specific needs, it will be easier for me to actually kind of flesh out what that's going to look like, the topology. Let's see, lessons learned so far. I've touched on some of this. I'm realizing that I need to be a lot better about breaking things into more actionable items. I think the concern for me is being able to break this up into chunks, and that's kind of the first point that I make on this. Hasn't really been a strong suit for me in the past, and so it's a learning curve for sure. I think part of, particularly with this project, working individually, we discussed this. A lot of my reasoning for stopping in the fall and waiting till the summer was I felt like I would do better in a group. I think given my lack of experience with these kind of things, my hope was that in a group setting, I would have a little bit more give and take and have be able to surround myself with individuals that have maybe a little more experience, and even if not more experience, just a scenario in which collectively we're working towards something, and so there will be more of that. Once one person figures something out, it gets shared. I will say, I think that setting up the Microsoft Teams group has been helpful. I think people have been pretty on board with sharing, whether it be documentation or issues that they're running into, and I imagine that will ramp up even more. We had a meeting last Wednesday. It was just 3 of us. But even so, it was at a minimum, that was just kind of comforting to talk to other people that are in the same boat as me, and be able to kind of discuss where we're at, what we're thinking, and some of the specific things that we're trying to tackle, what we envision as hurdles. And even in that discussion with just the 3 of us, there was definitely some helpful takeaways. And there was also just the encouragement of kind of talking to somebody that's in the same boat as you. And I think I talked, a little bit. That was kind of the next bullet point, was just that I do think that I've learned a lot about leveraging things like Teams. We obviously are in a pretty weird circumstance with the whole COVID thing. And so being able to pivot and utilize something like that, when my expectation was that I was going to be working in a group, to try and make an effort to fill in that gap as much as we can. That's kind of where that has stemmed from. So I've told my wife this. I think that my intention is just to keep after this. I think that in the worst case scenario, it becomes a learning experience for me, and there's some aspects that I can then carry into the fall and hopefully take it in that group setting. And if not, then I can kind of struggle my way through this. I definitely want to graduate and finish this. It has been a long time coming. So I'm gonna do everything I can to try and complete this as much as I can and get it in a fashion such that it is satisfactory to what you need. And I guess I'm tempering that with the understanding that if that doesn't happen, it's okay, and they'll be this fall. yeah, I think that's it. I've got all of my Trello stuff screen capped in here, some notes that I've taken. I'm continuing to add to my to-do list in Trello and hoping that I will continue to flesh that out. I'm actually looking forward to kind of getting some feedback from you about where you feel like I can make some improvements and where maybe I'm coming up short right now. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. Like I said, look forward to hearing back from you about this. And yeah, hope you're doing well and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.